For hundreds of years, people have been trying to cross the Atlantic as fast as they can, both for the ability to market themselves to passengers, but also to claim the title for their countries. Over the years, the design of ships was refined to go as fast as possible. Nowadays, planes took over, and the water speed record was left to racers and hydrofoils. But before the age of ocean liners ended, there was a ship that defied all odds and allowed the age of ocean liners to go out with a bang. Named for the country she was built in, this was the SS United States. This ship's story starts with a man named William Francis Gibbs, a man who dreamed of making ships since he was little. He got his start designing the SS Leviathan, a former German liner given to the United States. Gibbs was tasked with renovating her into America's flagship, and even though the three companies that owned the sisters all claimed that they were the largest, the Leviathan, Berengaria, and Majestic were in reality very similar, though the SS Berengaria was the first. Gibbs wanted to show his talent with this ship, and it showed. The ship was very competitive and beautiful, and the government and public were intrigued with Gibbs. He ended up designing the SS Malolo, his first custom-built ship. It was a good one, but on its first voyage, the ship ended up being struck by a freighter, bashing open a hole in her side. She should have sank right then and there, but she stayed afloat and ended up having a long career with Matson and Chandos lines. Gibbs was touted as the man who could make any ship unsinkable, and so he got to work. The US government, which controlled the United States lines, needed a replacement for the Leviathan in 1936, and, while not the superliner he wanted to make, this ship would end up becoming the SS America, a ship that would sail for 50 years and have a very eventful life. And, at the end of the Second World War, Gibbs had made over 70% of America's ocean liners. He then decided that America needed a superliner, and one that could take away the blue ribbon for America. The US government was intrigued and asked if the ship could be used in war to transport troops. By the end of the Second World War, a third one was looking likely, and if the US needed fast ocean liners, Gibbs would be the one to design them. This came with the benefits of accessing classified US Navy technology on how they got their destroyers to go so fast. Gibbs opted for US Navy Type M boilers, turning 4 shafts, giving it a power of 240,000 horse shaft power. The propellers were made to limit cavitations, and the inboard propeller had 5 blades, with the outboard having 4, a secret that made her go so fast. The SS United States was theorized to run on fuel, but steam turbines were favored due to motors being so new. The interiors were very 50s and were made by the same people that made the interiors for the SS America. It was designed by an all-women team, mainly because the design philosophy was that back then, women were the main bookers of vacations, so it was to appeal to them. In fact, the pool actually had a painting of nautical flags that said, "Comin' in, the water's warm." Due to Gibbs's history with safety, he made an entire fireproof ship with only the wood on the ship being cutting boards. The ship had some of the largest funnels on an ocean liner and were able to prevent soot from going on the deck. The top speed of the ship is classified till this day. However, speculation states she could go 43 knots with a cruising speed and 45 at emergency speed. The class system of the United States was first cabin tourist class. First class had the best service, with many famous people sailing in first class, such as Marilyn Brando, Marilyn Monroe, Bob Hope, John Wayne, John Crawford, as well as the King and Queen of Greece. Former Presidents Eisenhower and Truman sailed on her. Also, the passenger list feature President John F. Kennedy, his wife Jackie Kennedy, and, in 1968, a young student named Bill Clinton. Cabin class aimed to sell tickets to the American middle class, those traveling to Europe for a vacation or moving to the US. Though less extravagant, this class was still nice and ended up selling well. Tourist class was aimed at those who are unable or unwilling to spend much on a ticket. It was often booked by migrants and students, located in the areas where walking would be most pronounced. Communal bathrooms were available, and service from the crew was lacking, though it was still much like first class on ships 20 years before then. The US Navy agreed to use the keel of the supercarrier at USS United States, named Coincidental, to build the ship, meaning that not only did that shipyard end up building a United States, but also the keel of that cancelled supercarrier continues to float till this day. The SS United States was also the first ship built in a dry dock, accelerating her construction. The United States Navy paid for a third of her construction, and when she was launched on June 23, 1951, she was immediately requisitioned. However, it was found converting the ship would take too long, and she went back to passenger service. She was 302 meters long, 30 meters wide, and had 9 meters below the waterline. The SS United States conducted her maiden voyage on July 3, 1952, crossing the Atlantic from the Ambrose Lightship to Bishop Rock in 3 days, 10 hours, with an average speed of 35 knots, beating the Queen Mary in 10 hours to take the eastbound record for America. However, the reason she went so slow is because Gibbs wanted to take the record only a little bit. Then the British would break it, and the United States could break it again, and it would cycle and repeat until they reached the final top speed. The ship also took the westbound crossing record, being met by helicopters and marching bands. In New York, she flew a blue flag as she went into New York. Her crew was welcomed, and a parade was held for them, attended by 2,000 people. Tickets for the ship were sold out for the next 3 years, and she was very popular, being praised for going fast, but also not skipping out on luxury. However, after her record-breaking crossing, she reduced her speed to 32 knots in order to maintain fuel efficiency, and made the crossing to take 5 days. However, in 1957, more passengers took piston planes than ocean liners. This would be the age when ocean liners died, but they weren't gone yet. Despite this, the United States was still popular and became a great symbol of the nation. Going into the 60s, the ship sailed between New York, Southampton, and Le Havre. Passengers reported that even when the wind was low, the speed of the ship made standing outside very windy. Although she overshadowed her running mate, the SS America, both stood alone and people still liked both. Even Walt Disney sailed aboard the ship at one time and made a film aboard the ship called Bon Voyage. The SS United States became the most popular ship on the Atlantic, and even if some would debate that, saying the Queen Mary was, there was a plan in 1958 to replace the SS America with a new running mate that would operate on the West Coast. This would become the SS President Washington. The plan was never realized, however, due to Congress not allocating funding, but it's funny to think we could have gotten an SS United States sailing on the Pacific. In 1960, a strike of pilots and mates caused voyages to be delayed. United States lines refused a yearly passenger count because it had become so low. Then, the United States Department of Commerce announced that they were terminating their contract with the United States Lines due to ocean liners being sitting ducks for bombers, despite the fast speed of the ship. Soldiers would now be transported via plane. United States Lines planned to use the SS America for cruising and even to convert the SS United States into a cruise ship. But the idea was dropped when it said the refit would cost $15 million. A new advertising campaign was aimed at promoting the ship's luxury, which somewhat worked and carried the ship for the next year with okay sales. However, in 1963, the first voyage was cancelled after only 350 people booked the ship. The company was still being funded by the government, no matter how expensive it was. With all this pressure, United States Lines caved and began offering cruises to Nassau, Curaçao, and St. Thomas in 1963. She continued to do this, and it was popular, but not enough to make money. They began running her faster on the Atlantic to do 3-day crossings instead of 5, but she was expensive and losing money to ships such as the SS France, and the ship continued to just barely make money until 1968, when only her, Queen Elizabeth, and SS France were left, and the SS America had been sold. She went on to have an amazing career with Chandos, and lived on even though she eventually wrecked, and still debated whether she became the greatest American liner or not. To distinguish herself, United States Lines ran the United States to Europe, Africa, and South America. She was once again the most popular ship on the Atlantic, saving her for another year. In 1969, United States Lines was bought by Walter Kidd & Co., who believed the age of ocean liners had passed. Then, the US government cancelled funding to the line after passenger numbers declined. Due to all this mounting pressure, on October 29, 1969, the ship made her 400th and final voyage, attracting huge crowds. Then, she left for Newport News to be refitted and certain objects sold off. However, when work was half finished on repainting, the line announced the retirement of the ship. It came as a shock to the newly unemployed sailors and those who had future bookings. She had made 800 crossings, 400 round trips, sailed 2,772,000 nautical miles, and carried 1,025,000 people. Fittings were sold off, and she sailed to Norfolk in Virginia and placed under the control of the U.S. Maritime Organization, who shut down United States Lines. NCL tried to buy the line, but the Navy refused due to the classified nature of the ship's construction. In 1977, the Navy unclassified a few of the ship's distinctions after removing the engines. In the late 70s, plans were studied to make her a hospital ship, after the Navy retired all the old ones. Her speed allowed her to respond quickly, and the size would allow the Navy to treat thousands of people, treating 1,600 people. However, the plan was dropped by the Navy. In 1993, she went to her new dock in Philadelphia. The ship was sold to a private real estate developer. However, when that failed, Norwegian Cruise Lines bought the ship with the intention of sailing her in Hawaii due to her being an American-built ship. However, the whole Hawaii thing pretty much failed, and not because the ship was too expensive to renovate, or because it was falling apart, but because the whole Hawaii cruises idea really did not work out. Norwegian Cruise Lines explored the idea again after the Norway went out of service in 2008, but this never happened. In 2009, the SS United States Conservancy was created to save the ship. A Philadelphia philanthropist then donated $400,000 to help them buy the ship. Over the next few years, many proposals happened, but none of them really came to fruition, and none of them are worth mentioning except for Crystal Cruises, promising to buy her in 2018. That same year, minor renovations were done to make her from completely falling apart. Crystal promised to return her to service as a new luxury ship. However, these renovations failed, and the cost of bringing the ship back made this never happen. But the design concepts are pretty interesting, and I also found these concepts which look even better. In fact, in 2023, just before what I'm about to mention happened, the ship was proposed to go to New York and almost sold to a design firm wanting to renovate a pier and have her as a permanent fixation. Once again, this plan never actually failed because of cost or anything. It actually failed because of what I'm about to mention here, but once again, the design concepts are really cool. In 2023, the owners of the pier the ship was docked at stopped the contract, forced a fee hike, and justified this, saying that the United States Conservancy wasn't paying for pier damage. The Conservancy and the pier sued each other, claiming each other was doing this illegally. In July 2024, the court sided with the pier owner and the ship was evicted, with a deadline being expanded due to the cost of relocation. In 2024, the ship's fate was sealed when Okaloosa County, Florida, bought the ship to be sunk in Florida as a reef. Unfortunately, this deal was signed and the ship was set to be sunk, with the Conservancy having been given $3 million, with the United States Conservancy planning a museum on Florida based on the ship, which is why donations are still a good idea to the Conservancy. Still, it is expected the SS United States will have her funnels and forward superstructure removed for the museum, and that the wreck will be available to civilian divers. As well as that, the project will take at least 18 months, meaning we won't have to say goodbye anytime soon. The community in Philadelphia was hit hard, and an impromptu memorial was set up in Philadelphia. The departure was consistently delayed, and the ship is now set to depart on February 18th, 2025, to be sunk sometime in 2026. It's really sad because a lot of the proposals to save the ship were so close to happening, but only failed just because of cost. Though it's a sad ending, the ship had a good life, and the ocean will ultimately claim her end. She will still exist for many more years at the bottom of the ocean and will not be sent over to make Toyotas in Japan. The ship was truly a flagship for America, and many people are sad to see her go. Some also say the sinking of the ship is a metaphor for the state of the country, but I say that the US literally blew up an entire aircraft carrier called a USS America, so it's not really that much of a statement. Still, it's a truly sad ending for a ship that had so much potential, and that was so close to being saved when her life was cut short. But ultimately, I am happy that we will still be able to visit her in some way, and that the SS United States Conservancy will continue to preserve her history through the museum. So, when will the ship finally leave Philadelphia? Will she break down during tow? And how much will the fish be charged to take a ride on her? It's a very good question.